As of July 18th, 2024, the BC NDP, led by its dictator David Eby, our BC beloved Premier David Eby, made changes to the Residential Tenancy Act that gives tenants more rights and takes rights away from landlords. Not only that, folks, these rule changes not only impacts first-time home buyers that are looking to purchase a tenanted property, but also impacts potential investors that might be entering the market. In today's video, we'll analyze a few of these proposed changes, look at the current state of the Abbotsford investors market, and at the end I'll give you my professional opinion on these rule changes. Before we get into it, if you like this content and want to be the first to learn about what's happening in your Abbey real estate market, please go ahead and hit the subscribe and like button. Let's get into it. In full disclosure, I am an Abbotsford realtor and I also own a few investment properties here in the Fraser Valley. So I'm all for tenant rights. The problem investors have is not with tenants, but it's with the provincial government that's taking rights away from landlords and is giving more and more rights to the tenants that we'll discuss in this video. The first proposed change is when a buyer is looking to move into a tenanted property, now they're going to have to give a notice that changes from 2 months to 4 months. Here's the thing, folks, when buyers are getting financing for a purchase, their approval is valid anywhere between 90 to 120 days. But now with the new rule changes, if you have someone that just bought their property in mid-July and they're looking to move into it, that means they wouldn't get possession of their property until the effective date of when the notice starts from August 1st till end of November, and they would get the keys to their new home on December 1st. In between this time period, you're looking at anywhere between 4.5 months to 5 months before they get the keys to their new home. The second change to the notice period is now tenants have 30 days instead of 15 days to dispute notices to end tenancy. The third change is if you're a landlord and you're moving into your investment property for personal use or for a caretaker to move in, these people must live in the property for a year before you sell. This just got extended from 6 months to 12 months. The fourth change is now if landlords want to move into their investment property, they have to use an online portal, give notice. Not only that, this portal outlines potential consequences to landlords if they end tenancy in bad faith. Some of the potential consequences could be that if landlords are found ending tenancy in bad faith, they owe tenants up to 1 year of rent. For this example, if you have a 2-bed, 2-bath condo that's rented out for $2,200 per month and you were found to end your tenancy on bad faith, that means you could be paying potentially $26,000 in fines. And the whole point of the NDP creating this portal is creating more fairness for tenants and protecting them. Not only that, it allows them to go back and audit, making sure that the people that were saying they were going to move in are the people moving in. Some of the negatives about this rule change is that when a landlord is taking personal use of that property, they have to provide the names of the people moving in, and this information is shared with the tenant. I get it, folks. When you're sharing this information with tenants, there is a breach of confidentiality and personal information. This rule change might be one of the good ones just because you would hear about previously that some landlords were ending tenancies in bad faith. Next, let's talk about some of the negatives with this recent rule changes for tenants and our economy. The first negative is as you have more investors exit the residential market and they're selling their investment properties, that's going to shrink the number of rental housing available. I was recently reading a study somewhere in Vancouver that 40% of the housing provided in Greater Vancouver for tenants is provided by mom and pop investors. Yet we have close to 1 million newcomers coming into this country each year. And among G7 nations, we have the lowest supply of new housing being built. So what that means for future rent prices is rent prices could skyrocket. The second thing is we're going to see more capital exit our province and go to different provinces like Alberta or even different countries. I've talked to a lot of investors over the last couple of weeks and trying to get their feedback about the recent rule changes. And some of these investors have been telling me that, you know what, Gary, we're fed up with the rule changes and we've owned these investment properties for long enough, but if we're going to continuously have stupid rule changes by the NDP, we're done. We're going to take our money, enjoy our life, or we'll invest it somewhere else. Next, let's talk about tenants talking about potentially getting into the housing market. I've been seeing a lot of other YouTubers, realtors, blogs where they've been talking about the recent changes, and some of the comments that you see on these posts are by tenants, and they'll say, great, we don't want landlords owning homes. and it gives us an opportunity to enter the market. But the only thing is, you might be seeing that for a number of years, and the one thing that's keeping a lot of people out of the market is the down payment. So now when a first-time home buyer is looking to purchase a 1-bed or 2-bed apartment here in Abbotsford, they're not going to be looking at buying an investment property because they might not be able to get the financing for that. Instead, now they're going to be looking at units that are vacant or owner-occupied. And what this means is they're going to face increased competition for these types of homes. The last thing is, yes, a lot of first-time home buyers are going to be scared of buying investment properties. I've seen that last year when I was representing a few buyers. And then the second portion is they're not going to be able to qualify for the financing because most lenders can only provide an approval from 90 to 120 days. I was just at the Fraser Valley Economic Summit, and this summit was hosted by the Abbotsford Chambers of Commerce. The municipality mayors that attended this conference was Mayor of Abbotsford, Mission, Chilliwack, and Langley. At this conference, what they were talking about is the strength of the Fraser Valley economy due to the agriculture sector. The second thing was there was a presentation done by an economist, and he was just talking about our provincial economy. Since the NDP has been in power, they have increased their spending year by year. What the economist noted was that the provincial NDP is spending money like they're a federal government, meaning they're spending way too much money and there's not enough money coming in. The main reason why their money is not coming in is there's no private sector money coming in. And the main reason for that is the BC NDP is not business friendly, and there's a lot of rules and policy in place that dissuades corporations from wanting to open up and do business here in BC, and they're looking at alternative provinces like Alberta. The other thing you talked about was our current GDP growth. GDP growth essentially means wage growth. And right now, our GDP growth for wages is negative 0.4. So what that means is wages in BC have not gone up, but actually have gone into the negatives. When you compare that to provinces like Alberta, where GDP growth for Edmonton and Calgary is anywhere between 3 to 6%, you can see the difference. Next, let's talk about the current state of the Abbotsford investment market. The first thing is investors are not investing in the Abbotsford real estate market because of the high interest rates. A lot of investors, when they're purchasing a second or third property, are taking money out of their home equity line. But because the home equity line interest rate is at 7%, and with the stress test, they have to qualify at a financing rate of 9%, and they're not able to qualify for a high enough mortgage. The second thing is there is no incentive for investors to being invested. Those incentives aren't provided by our provincial socialist government and the federal government. Let's just talk about some of the negative rule changes that the BC government and the federal Liberals have introduced. The first rule that was brought forward by the BC NDP was getting rid of rental restrictions for all strata complexes. One advantage buyers had before the rule change was when they were looking to buy a condo or a townhome where rentals were not allowed or there were rental restrictions, prices for these complexes were generally lower and they weren't competing amongst investors. But now what's happened is if you analyze the prices for recent sales in these complexes, you'll notice the prices have skyrocketed. Not only that, folks, I was reading an article on the Western Investor where they said when the BC NDP made this rule change, there were research groups that were writing to the BC NDP and the idiotic Premier David Eby to not make these changes, but because there was no research backing it up. And actually what they found was there was more rental units available in those complexes where there was no rental restrictions. And what did this do? What did these guys do? They removed them anyhow. The second change is getting rid of Airbnbs. So now if people had bought investment properties and were using them as Airbnbs, they're no longer allowed. And the only place you can have an Airbnb is at your principal residence. The third rule change introduced by the BC NDP was if you buy a residential property, you have to keep it for 2 years or you're going to be paying a 20% tax rate. And this applies not only to investors, you guessed it, first-time home buyers again. What did our federal government do? They made changes to the capital gains tax that is going to dissuade more and more people not to invest their money into Canada and look at alternatives. Number 3, investors are looking at alternative investments such as investing in different provinces, countries, or different asset classes. The fourth thing is people that have owned investment properties for years are now looking to exit the housing market just because of the recent stupid rule changes. The new proposed rule changes, the NDP doesn't give two shits about landlords. They can say whatever they want on paper, on media, but they are on an outright war against landlords, and it's election years. So our provincial elections are happening this year in, I believe, October 24th or in November. So what are they doing? They're introducing stupid social policies, trying to win votes for young people. The thing is, folks, young people should not fall into the trap. The BC NDP is not going to make housing any cheaper, and also they're not going to make renting more affordable either. The only way to get ahead in this country and province is learning financial literacy skills and taking charge of your financial journey. That's what I did right after university. I started learning financial literacy skills, and I started reaching out to mentors where I could learn these skills. And one thing that I can tell you folks from being on this journey, once you enter the housing market, it's a lot easier to upgrade to a newer home or buy an investment property. Maybe these recent rule changes will be good for one thing. They will eliminate people that were gambling and purchasing properties to flip. But what this does is when people are looking to buy an investment property or are holding on to an investment property, it will force them to hold on to their investment property for a very long time, which is the ultimate goal for all investors, whether you're investing in the real estate market or the stock market. Again, I want to make this very clear. I'm all for tenant rights. Tenants should be protected, but the same type of protection should be provided to landlords that are providing these housing. The thing is, folks, landlords, when there's toilets, stoves, or anything that needs to be fixed, we're not given a grace period. Landlords go ahead and get those repairs made. They want to make sure the tenant has a livable space where they can enjoy and live in. For investors to continue to invest and hold on to BC real estate, there needs to be changes to a Residential Tenancy Act where there's an equilibrium of rights that creates fairness for both landlords and tenants. If you're an investor or tenant, let me know what you think about the recent rule changes below. If you're an investor and you're looking to sell a tenanted property, one of the best things that you should do is seek independent legal advice and talk to your lawyer. Do you still have more questions about what these changes mean to your investment property? Feel free to book a meeting with me by clicking the first link in the description. If you found today's content valuable, please go ahead and hit the subscribe and like button so we can get this information out to more investors just like you. I'm Gary Dhindsa, and I'll see you next week.